Have you ever felt like something just won't leave you alone? That no matter how hard you try to get rid of it, it always comes back, like a shadow that never goes away. That's exactly what happened to me. And believe me, the price I paid was too high. But what if I told you that there is a way to escape before it's too late? Stay with me until the end, because this story could change everything you believe about what's real and what's not. Today, I brought another frightening report that arrived directly in our email. Each story I receive goes through careful editing to maintain the full essence of fear while protecting the identity of those who decided to share these dark moments with us. Now, it's worth remembering. I believe that these stories really happened to whoever sent them to me, but I can't prove anything. So in the end, it's up to you to decide, believe it or not. Well, let me introduce myself properly. I have been a gravedigger for over 12 years. I've seen everything in that time. Farewell tears, cold looks from those who only went out of obligation, but honestly, I never really cared. My work has always been with the dead, not the living. I just did my job, got paid, and moved on with my life. Just like that. At least, that's what I thought. Until that. Today, it was a stormy afternoon, the kind where the sky weighs heavily on your head and the rain never lets up. I was preparing the burial of a well-known man in the city, Mr. Otacilio. He was said to be a successful merchant, owning several stores and properties. But there was something else that everyone knew about him, the reputation of being extremely petty. You know those types of people who count every penny and never let change slip away? He was exactly like that. As I placed his body in the coffin, I felt a strange shiver. The silence at that moment was different, heavy. Or maybe it was the way his suit looked so impeccable, so sharp. I don't know. All I know is that when I looked more closely, I noticed something in his jacket pocket, a discreet volume, small, but enough to get my attention. The coffin was still open. Nobody around. The rain fell thinly, and the wind made the tree branches creak around me. I looked around just to make sure I was alone. So without thinking much, I reached out and put my hand in my jacket pocket. That's when I felt it, a smooth, folded paper. When I pulled it out, I almost couldn't believe what I saw. A 100 note, brand new, as if it had just come out of the bank. I stood there for a moment, looking at that money. The sound of rain mixed with the echo of my own thoughts. He won't need that money. The idea seemed so logical. After all, the man was dead. He wouldn't need it anymore. And no one would miss a single note, right? Before any trace of guilt or fear could change my mind, I stuffed the note in my pocket, fast, like someone who does something wrong and hopes they don't get caught. At that moment, I had no idea that this small act would change my life forever. Later that same night, I decided I deserved a celebration. It had been a while since I had extra money to spend, and that note seemed like the perfect excuse for a little luxury. I went to the city bar. Nothing fancy but cozy, the kind of place I used to have a beer or two when the budget allowed. But this time, I could afford more. I ordered a generous round, cold beer, crackling, fried pepperoni. I plopped down at a table in the corner, relaxed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could just enjoy the night without worrying about tomorrow. Talk goes, talk comes. I exchanged a few words with the bartender about the local football team. And the best, at no point did I feel regret about the money I'd taken. The man is dead. He doesn't need this anymore. When it came time to pay the bill, I took the bill out of my pocket and handed it to the bartender with the calmness of someone who thinks they've gotten lucky in life. But it was the next morning that things started to get weird, very strange. The next morning, when I was putting on my work uniform, I felt something strange in my pocket. I put my hand in, and there it was, the same 100 note, intact. I stood still. For a moment, folding the paper between my fingers, it was exactly the same, with that little mark in the corner that I had noticed the day before. But how was this possible? I clearly remembered spending that bill at the bar. I remembered handing it to the bartender, getting my change, counting the coins in my pocket. But somehow, she was there. Back. I tried to convince myself that maybe I had gotten it wrong, that maybe he had another note and didn't remember it. So I decided to spend it again. On the same day, I went to the market and did some shopping. I got meat, rice, coffee, even a bag of flour that my wife had been asking for a while. I also bought a puzzle for my niece, who loved putting these things together. I took the opportunity to pay a late electricity bill. When I got home and put the groceries on the table, I sighed with relief. It was as if that money was appearing at exactly the right time, meeting all my needs. But then, the next morning, there she was, in the same pocket, doubled the same way. For a while, I thought it was funny. Maybe it was a stroke of luck, an unexpected gift from life. I continued to spend the note every day. I paid an old debt with the baker, bought a new shirt, and even left some change in my wife's pocket without saying where it came from. It was as if the note never ended. At first, I thought it was wonderful. It was as if, for the first time in my life, I had a financial breather, a small miracle that allowed me to live without so much worry. But as the weeks went by, things started to change, and what once seemed like a blessing turned into a nightmare. It all started with small things. Objects in my house started falling without explanation. A glass on the table slid down on its own and shattered on the floor. The salt shaker moved slowly until it fell. At first, I tried to ignore it. I thought it was just a coincidence, my carelessness. But every time that happened, I felt a shiver go up my spine, and then came the noises. Footsteps in the hallway, doors creaking alone, rhythmic tapping on the wall, as if someone was trying to get my attention on the other side. My room, which had always been a refuge, began to feel suffocating. The air was heavy, charged. I felt something watching me all the time. And then that morning, I woke up with an inexplicable cold. It wasn't just a cold wind or an open window, it was a different cold. Deep, as if it came from the ground, and enveloped me completely. I got up shaking. I went to the room, and then I saw it. The television was on, but there was no sound, just a screen full of hissing, white and black stripes flashing. I stood there, still, trying to understand. My heart hammered in my chest. That's when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow, high, slender, standing there in the corner of the room. I quickly turned my face, and there was nothing. But I knew it wasn't my imagination. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't a television error. It wasn't normal. And in that moment, I finally understood. That note was not a gift, it was a curse. In the following days, everything got worse. One night, while listening to the radio, it just turned off. At the time, I thought it was the energy. But when I looked closer, the radio wasn't even plugged in. Even so, it turned on and off by itself. It only emitted an unsettling static, a hiss that filled the silence of the house. It was as if someone was messing with him or something. Later that night, as I was trying to sleep, I felt a weight on the bed, as if someone had just sat down next to me. My breathing caught. I looked around, but there was nothing. The air in the room was cold, very cold. That's when I heard it, a low laugh, far away, almost imperceptible, but present enough to make every strand of my body stand on end. After that, the nightmares started. Every night, I saw the face of Senor Otacilio, but he didn't seem normal. He was pale, like the day I placed him in the coffin, but the eyes were deep, 2 empty caves, and the smile, too wide, inhuman. And I always said the same thing with a voice that remained inside my head. You stole what was mine. Now it's your turn. I woke up screaming, the body drenched in sweat. And the worst part, his words still echoed in the air, as if they had been whispered right there in my ear. One of those nights I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, dragged away, as if someone was wearing heavy shoes. The footsteps stopped, right at my bedroom door. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I waited. Any sound, any movement, nothing. I gathered courage, slowly got up and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the floor had footprints, wet as if someone had just come in from the rain. After that, the days became unbearable. I was tired, overwhelmed. The feeling that I was never truly alone suffocated me. One afternoon, while washing the dishes, I felt something, one hand, cold, on my shoulder. I was so scared that I dropped the plate, shattering on the floor. I turned around reflexively. There was no one, but the cold of that touch was still there. It burned my skin. At this point, I no longer knew what to do. My house was no longer mine. Something or someone was there with me all the time, observing, waiting. And the worst, I knew exactly when this all started. The moment I put that damn 100 bill in my pocket. One night, as I was trying to sleep, I heard it again. That low laugh. It came from the corner of the room, where the darkness seemed thickest, more alive. I turned on the light reflexively. Nothing. The corner was empty, but fear had already taken over me. I knew it wasn't going to stop, and deep down, I knew that Ottacilio was behind everything. What I didn't know was how to escape. With each passing day, the feeling that my life no longer belonged to me increased. My home, once a refuge, had become a prison, and I, the prisoner of a curse that I brought into my life. If there was anything I feared more than tormented nights, it was what could come next. Something told me that this was just the beginning. Then came the nightmares. All to the nights I saw the face of Senor Ottacilio, pale, the eyes too deep, the smile too wide, and he always said the same thing. You stole what was mine. Now it's your turn. I woke up screaming, the body drenched in sweat, until one night I decided this had to end. I took the note and went to the cemetery with a shovel in his hands. The full moon illuminated everything. The wind seemed to mock me. With my heart racing, I started digging. The noise of the earth being removed seemed to echo in the silence of the early morning. Until the shovel hit something, the coffin. My hands were shaking, but I continued. I opened the coffin. The smell of death invaded me immediately. The body was already decomposing. But the eyes, my God, the eyes seemed to stare at me. I took a deep breath, and with shaking hands, I slipped the note into his jacket pocket. And I murmured, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." It was at that moment that I felt it, something cold, grabbing my arm. The scream stuck in my throat, my blood froze, and then I ran like never before in my life. Tears were streaming down my face. I left the coffin open. I didn't look back. The next day, still shaking, I did what needed to be done. I looked for Ottacilio's family. I told everything, even with shame, even though I was afraid of what they would think of me. To my surprise, no one was shocked. His niece, with teary eyes, took a deep breath and told me a story that made my blood run cold. She said that Ottacilio was obsessed with money. Shortly before he died, he found that same 100 bill spent. But the money came back. At first, he thought it was luck. But soon, noises, figures, nightmares. He said something was following him. As the days went by, he was so pressured by the scares that he died of his heart, holding the note. The family didn't know what to do, so they buried the note with him. thinking that would end the story, but it didn't end. The niece wiped away her tears. He looked into my eyes and whispered, "He wanted this, you know. He was petty even in death. He wants to take away our peace." At that moment, I realized I was trapped. There was no way out, no apparent solution. The 100 reais note, which once seemed like an unexpected blessing, had turned into a curse, an invisible current that dragged me deeper and deeper into despair. I tried everything to get rid of it. I burned it in the fire in the fireplace. I watched as the flames consumed it completely, turning into nothing but ashes. But the next morning, there she was, intact, in the same pocket as my uniform. I threw it in the river. I saw the current carry her away, swallowed by the dark water. But the next day, tripe, in the same place, as if he was mocking me, I buried her in a tomb in the cemetery, under the cold earth, where no one would ever dare touch. But still, she came back. The nights became even darker. What was once just shapes and noises turned into something more physical, more terrible. The shadows were no longer in the corners. Now they were getting closer. They almost touched me. I could feel the cold air around me, as if invisible hands were trying to grab me. Sometimes I felt something brush against my skin, a light and cold touch that made me scream in the middle of the night. The walls seemed to breathe. They creaked, as if something alive was hiding inside them. Until one morning, I woke up to a strange sound. Steps, heavy on the ceiling. They weren't rats. It wasn't something small. It looked like someone walking from one side to the other, deliberately. I went out to check. Nothing. My house was turning into a real nightmare. The television turned on by itself in the middle of the night, always displaying distorted and frightening images. Pale, deformed faces appeared for seconds before they disappear into the static. The radio that I didn't even use anymore. He played old songs, full of squeaks, even turned off, even unplugged. It was as if the house itself was possessed. And every day, I felt something more was coming. Something worse. Something that wanted me, all of me. My fingers were shaking, the cold metal of the fork pressed against my skin. The sound of knocking on the wall continued, rhythmic, provocative. A low laugh mingled with the silence. I couldn't take it anymore. I closed my eyes. My breathing was ragged, my chest heaving with despair. My mind screamed to get it over with, but then it was what I felt. One touch, an icy breath against the back of my neck. My eyes opened in a reflex of pure terror. And there, right in front of me, Otacilio's reflection in the glass of the bookshelf. He was so close, his face deformed by time, mouth open in an impossible smile, the eyes, two dark and empty caves. The bottle fell out of my hands. My body didn't move. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but he was paralyzed. His laugh filled my ears. High frantic, inhumane. The lights started to flicker. The walls shook as if something huge was crawling inside them. And then, suddenly, silence. The air became heavy. Darkness thickened around me. I was alone, or at least, that's what I thought. Because when I looked in my pocket, the 100 note was there, but this time, soaked in blood. And in that instant, I knew the true price had not yet been charged. My heart was beating so hard that it felt like it wanted to come out of my chest. I was kneeling on the floor, crying, not knowing what else to do. It was then that a memory came to my mind like a bolt of lightning. The church. My mother always said that God's house was a place where we could leave our problems. Maybe that was it. Maybe it was the only way to free myself from this curse. I wiped my tears, put the bottle away, and grabbed the damn 100 bill. My hands were shaking, but I decided, I'm going to go to church and I'm going to donate this money. Maybe this will end it all. But deep down, I already knew it wasn't going to be easy. I took the note and walked out into the dark street. The morning was cold, but not normal cold. It was one of those strange, heavy silences that leave you with the feeling that someone is watching. I took the first turn around the corner, and suddenly the wind changed. A strange breeze blew from all sides at once, as if it wanted to push me away. The trees swayed strangely, the streetlights flickered as if they were about to go out. And then I saw him, a beggar who always slept on the sidewalk of an abandoned bakery. I'd already passed it several times, always lying down, motionless, but this time he was sitting, looking directly at me. His eyes were different, too deep, like two black holes that sucked in all the light around them. He opened his mouth and said in a hoarse and dark voice, "Don't go." My feet got stuck. A shiver ran up my spine. "What?" I asked, trying to convince myself that it was just a delusional old man, but he repeated it, now getting up. "Don't go to church." My heart almost stopped. His silhouette seemed bigger than before, as if the darkness around him grew along with him. "You don't understand what you're doing. If so, he won't let you go." My instinct screamed to run away. I quickened my pace, ignoring the dark presence behind me. But just as I was walking away, his voice turned into a scream. "You have no idea what you are summoning." I didn't look back. I couldn't look. The wind picked up, swirling around me like a whirlwind, and then thunder cut across the sky. The storm was coming, and I didn't know if I would be able to get to church in time. Minutes later, the first drops began to fall. At first, it was just a light drizzle, barely a whisper of rain, but then the storm came. In a matter of seconds, the sky collapsed. The water was falling with such force that it looked like someone had tipped a giant bucket up there. The streets began to fill up very quickly, as if a river had appeared out of nowhere. My clothes were soaked, heavy, making every step difficult. Mud ran down the sidewalks and the drains instead of swallowing. The water spat it back out as if the city was drowning. The sound of the rain was deafening, but still, I listened. Whispers. They came on the wind, creeping past my ears. I couldn't understand the words, but I felt it was something bad. And then I saw them. Shadows. They moved in the alleys, lurking, watching me. They weren't people, I was sure. With every step I took towards the church, they came closer, and then a bolt of lightning streaked across the sky. For a second, I saw something in front of me. A figure. High, skinny, unreal. I couldn't tell if it was a person or something else, but his presence was so frightening that it made my blood run cold. I blinked and she disappeared, but fear clung to my chest like an impossible weight to carry. The water already reached my ankles. Every step was difficult. The sidewalks were slippery, treacherous. The cold was biting, and the feeling that someone or something wanted to stop me from getting to church grew with every second. It was as if everything was against me. The beggar, the storm, the shadows. Even the wind itself seemed to push me back, but I couldn't give up. Each step was accompanied by a whisper of prayer. My hands were shaking, and then I felt it. The 100 note in my pocket. She burned as if she were alive, as if he wanted to run away, as if he knew I was trying to end it. Finally, I saw the church. It was there, intact. In the midst of that storm, the cold and fear, it seemed like a refuge. Candles glowed softly in the stained glass windows, casting dancing shadows on the floor. It was a small point of hope in the midst of chaos. But when I tried to open the door, something stopped me. A strong wind blew against me, pushing the wood. As if someone or something didn't want me to enter, I grabbed the handle tightly and pushed. The resistance was enormous, as if he was fighting an invisible force. But I couldn't give up. With one last effort, I succeeded. I rushed in and closed the door behind me. Silence. Inside there was no rain, no thunder, no shadows lurking in the alleys, but the air was heavy. The 100 note in my pocket was burning, hotter than ever. But I knew I was in the right place. I knelt down, my breathing was rapid, my body was shaking, but I started to pray. I asked for forgiveness. I begged God to free me from that curse, and that's when I felt it. Something moved. The environment has changed. The temperature rose. It was as if something there was furious at my presence. It wasn't just uncomfortable heat, it was pain. The note burned my skin like hot coals in my pocket. I tried to pull her away, but it was like she was resisting. Every step I took towards the altar made the candles flicker, but there was no wind. It was as if the entire place was watching me. I knelt on one of the benches. I prayed with all my strength. Needed to get rid of it. I needed to deliver that note. As I prayed, I heard footsteps, quick, whispering behind me. I turned around reflexively. Nothing. The chill down my spine was unbearable. Something was there with me. I felt it, but he couldn't see. I went back to praying, ignoring the fear that suffocated me. Shortly afterwards, the church brothers began collecting donations. Collection bags were passed from hand to hand, and then they came to me. My hand hesitated. The note still burned in his pocket, but I knew it was now or never. With a shaking hand, I took the money out of my pocket. The note still felt warm, as if it were alive. But I couldn't hesitate. I put it in the donation bag and let it go. At the exact moment my fingers opened, I felt something unbelievable. The weight is gone. The heat disappeared. The burning pain in my skin just went away. But before I could breathe a sigh of relief, something changed in the environment. The candles began to flicker, shaking as if a strong wind passed through them. But there was no wind. The air grew colder, and then a low, strange sound echoed through the church. A growl. I looked around, my heart racing, but no one seemed to notice anything. I closed my eyes and continued praying, hoping it was all over. And then it happened. I left church that morning and felt relief hit my chest like a wave. The storm had disappeared. The sky was clear. The moon was shining high above, lighting my way back home. The silence that once seemed oppressive was now peaceful, welcoming. I walked slowly, my legs still shaking, but something inside me had changed. Maybe, just maybe, it would be over. Upon entering the house, I noticed that something was different. The air was no longer heavy. There were no shadows in the corners, no feeling of being watched. My home felt like mine again. I went straight to the shower, letting the hot water wash away the cold, the fear, the weight of that night. Then I lay down on the bed, this time without fear. No steps in the darkness, no whispering voices. For the first time, in a long, long time, I felt safe. I closed my eyes and I slept. No nightmares, no torment, just a deep, restorative sleep. When I woke up, the sun was already shining through the window. I sat on the bed, breathing deeply, trying to organize my thoughts, remembering everything that had happened, and wondering if that was really behind me. That's when the anxiety came back with a vengeance. My heart raced, and a thought dominated me. I needed to check my pocket. I jumped up, picked up the uniform that was thrown on the chair, and hurriedly rummaged through the fabric. My stomach knotted. The pocket was empty. Then I lay down on the bed, this time without fear. No steps in the darkness, no whispering voices. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt safe. I closed my eyes, and I slept. No nightmares, no torment, just a deep, restorative sleep. When I woke up, the sun was already shining through the window. I sat on the bed, breathing deeply, trying to organize my thoughts, remembering everything that had happened, and wondering if that was really behind me. That's when the anxiety came back with a vengeance. My heart raced, and a thought dominated me. I needed to check my pocket. I jumped up, picked up the uniform that was thrown on the chair, and hurriedly rummaged through the fabric. My stomach knotted. The pocket was empty. If you like this story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos.